Please don't leave me here." The girl was standing at the edge of the parking lot behind the Loblaws on Danforth Avenue, barefoot on wet asphalt, holding a plastic bag that contained everything she owned. She was not speaking to anyone. She was speaking to the air, to the evening, to whatever part of the universe was still accepting requests from 9-year-old girls who had run out of places to go. Across the lot, walking toward a dark sedan with a cane in one hand and a paper bag of groceries in the other, Malcolm Ashford stopped. He did not stop because he had heard the words clearly. He stopped because he had heard the tone, and the tone was one he recognized, the particular flatness of a voice that had given up on being heard, but had not yet given up on speaking. Malcolm was 63. He had been a senior partner at Hastings, Ashford & Cruz for 31 years, one of the most respected corporate litigation firms in Toronto. He had argued cases before the Supreme Court of Canada. He had once, in a negotiation that lasted 9 days in a windowless room in Calgary, convinced a mining company to pay $400 million to a First Nations community whose river they had poisoned. He had been, by every measure the world uses to keep score, successful. He had also been, for the past 14 months, mostly deaf in his left ear and increasingly deaf in his right, the result of a condition called otosclerosis that was slowly turning the small bones of his inner ears into calcium. His audiologist, a gentle woman named Dr. Yoon, had told him 6 months ago that without surgery the hearing loss would be profound within 2 years. Malcolm had not yet scheduled the surgery. He had not yet told anyone at the firm. He had not yet told his daughter Bridget, who lived in Vancouver and called every Sunday at 4 o'clock Pacific time, and who would, he knew, immediately fly home and begin managing his life with the same determined competence she brought to everything, which was exactly the thing he did not want. He adjusted the hearing aid in his right ear. The girl's voice sharpened slightly. "I'll be good. I promise I'll be good." She was talking to a phone. Malcolm could see the screen glowing against her face. The call ended, or was ended for her, and the girl lowered the phone and stood looking at the blank screen with the expression of someone who had just watched a door close that she had not expected to close. Malcolm set the groceries on the hood of his car. He did not walk toward her. He had spent 40 years reading rooms, reading silences, reading the distances people kept between themselves and the thing they were afraid of. And he understood that a man in a suit approaching a barefoot child in an empty parking lot at dusk needed to be very careful about how he occupied space. "Are you all right?" he called from where he stood. 10 meters, enough distance that she could run if she needed to. The girl looked up. She had dark hair cut unevenly, as though someone had done it with kitchen scissors in bad light. Her jacket was too large, a man's windbreaker, and her feet on the wet pavement were very white and very dirty. "I'm fine, sir. You don't have shoes on." "I know, it's October. I know that too." Malcolm leaned against the car. He crossed his arms, not in a way that was closed off, but in a way that said he was staying put, that she did not need to come closer, that he was merely a man leaning against a car in a parking lot on Danforth, and that the evening was his to waste if he chose. "Who were you talking to?" A pause. The kind of pause he had heard 1,000 times from witnesses, deciding which version of the truth would get them through the next 5 minutes. "My aunt. She was supposed to pick me up from the group home at 5. She didn't come. I walked here because she works near here sometimes. I called her. She said she can't take me anymore. She said the paperwork is too much. Where is the group home?" "Cosburn Avenue. It's far. My feet hurt. What's your name?" "Hazel. Hazel, my name is Malcolm. I'm going to call someone who can help. I'm not going to come any closer to you. I'm going to stay right here by this very boring car and make a phone call. Is that all right?" The girl nodded once. Malcolm took out his phone. He called the only person he trusted entirely, which was Jocelyn Firth, who had been his legal assistant for 22 years, and who had in that time managed his calendar, his correspondence, his travel, and on at least 3 occasions his conscience. Jocelyn answered on the 3rd ring. "Malcolm, it's nearly 8. Jocelyn, I'm in the parking lot behind the Loblaws on Danforth. There is a child here. She is 9, possibly 10. She is barefoot. She has been abandoned by a relative. She says she walked from a group home on Cosburn. I need you to contact Children's Aid, and I need you to do it without putting this child into a system that will lose her before morning." Jocelyn was quiet for precisely 2 seconds. In 22 years, Malcolm had never known her to need more than 3. "Stay with her. Don't let anyone else approach. I'll have someone there in 20 minutes. I'm also calling Ruth." Ruth Okafor was a family court judge Malcolm had known for 15 years. She was not the kind of judge who went home at 5 and stopped being a judge. She was the kind who kept a spare bedroom made up in her house in Leslieville because twice in her career she had needed it for a child who had nowhere else to be at midnight. "Call Ruth," Malcolm said. He put the phone away. He looked at the girl. She had not moved. She was holding the plastic bag against her chest, and he could see the shapes inside it, a rolled piece of clothing, something rectangular that was probably a book, a smaller shape he could not identify. Hazel, some people are coming to help. They're good people. While we wait, would you like to sit down? There's a bench by the wall there. I don't want to go back to the group home, why not? Another pause. Longer this time. There are too many kids. The lady who runs it is nice, but she's tired. She's always tired. The older kids take things. I had a photograph of my dad and one of them took it. And I don't know which one, and nobody looked for it because they said it was just a picture. It wasn't just a picture. No, sir. Malcolm felt something turn over in his chest, a slow, heavy thing, like a stone being moved from a place it had been sitting for a long time. He had spent his career arguing about damages, about compensation, about what was owed when something was taken. He had never once argued a case about a stolen photograph of a dead parent, and he understood in this moment that the law he practiced was, in certain lights, absurdly large and absurdly small at the same time. Where's your father? He died. 2 years ago. He worked at a warehouse in Scarborough, and something fell on him. A pallet. They said it was an accident, but my mom said it wasn't because the safety rail was broken, and they knew it was broken, and they didn't fix it. And your mother? She got sad after. Really sad. The kind where you don't get up. She went to a place. A hospital, but not a regular one. My aunt said she was getting better, but she's been saying that for a year and a half. What's your mother's name? Solène. Solène Duval. The name landed in Malcolm with a weight that was not about the name itself, but about the way the girl said it, carefully, fully, as though she was protecting each syllable from being mispronounced by the world. A car pulled into the lot. Not Jocelyn. A silver hatchback driven by a woman Malcolm did not recognize. The woman parked and went into the store. She did not look at the girl. She did not look at Malcolm. She walked past them both in the way that people in cities walk past things they have trained themselves not to see. Hazel, when was the last time you saw your mother? Last Christmas. My aunt drove me. It took 2 hours. My mom was sitting in a chair by the window. She didn't say anything. She held my hand for a while, and then a nurse came and said visiting hours were over, and I said I hadn't been there very long, and the nurse said it had been 45 minutes. It didn't feel like 45 minutes. Did she know who you were? She squeezed my hand twice. That's what she used to do when I was little. 2 squeezes means I love you. 1 squeeze means I'm here. 3 means everything is going to be fine. She gave me 2, so I think she knew. Malcolm took off his glasses and pressed his thumb and forefinger against the bridge of his nose. He stood like that for a moment. He was not technically crying. He was doing the thing that came before crying, the thing that people who have spent decades being composed do when composition is no longer sufficient, but collapse is not yet permitted. He put his glasses back on. A black SUV turned into the lot. Jocelyn stepped out of the passenger side. She was 60, silver-haired, wearing the same gray trench coat she had worn for as long as Malcolm had known her, and she moved across the lot with the efficient calm of a woman who had been solving urgent problems for other people since before most of those people knew the problems existed. Behind her, from the driver's side, came a younger woman Malcolm recognized, Sonia Vasquez, a social worker from the East Toronto Children's Aid Society whom Jocelyn had, by whatever channel Jocelyn used for such things, reached in 19 minutes on a Monday evening. Jocelyn reached Malcolm first. She looked at the girl. She looked at Malcolm. She did not ask him if he was all right, because Jocelyn had never in 22 years asked him if he was all right, and he had never asked her, and this was, between them, a form of respect. Ruth is expecting a call at 9, Jocelyn said quietly. Sonia is going to take Hazel tonight, not to the group home. Ruth has authorized an emergency placement. Sonia has a colleague, a woman named Faye, who does short-term foster care in the beaches. She's good. She's been doing this for 12 years. Hazel will have her own room. I want to know where she is. Jocelyn looked at him for a moment. Malcolm. I want to know. You've known this child for 15 minutes. Jocelyn. I have known a great many people for a great many years, and most of them are less honest than this child has been with me in 15 minutes in a parking lot. I want to know where she is. I want to know that she's safe. I want to be able to reach the woman, Faye, and I want you to find out where Solène Duval is, and what her condition is, and what it would take to arrange a visit. Jocelyn did not argue. She had learned in 22 years to distinguish between Malcolm's requests and Malcolm's instructions. This was an instruction. Sonia approached Hazel with the particular gentleness of someone who had done this many times and understood that the gentleness was not optional. She knelt so that she was at the girl's eye level. Hi, Hazel. My name is Sonia. I work with kids. I'm going to take you somewhere warm tonight, where there's food and a bed, and nobody is going to take anything from you. Does that sound okay? Hazel looked past Sonia to Malcolm. Is he coming? Mr. Ashford has some things to take care of tonight, but I know he'll check on you. Will he? She was asking Malcolm, not Sonia. She was asking him with the flat, testing directness of a child who had been told many things by many adults and had learned to calibrate her trust by the eyes, not the words. I will, Malcolm said. You have my word and I do not give it lightly. Hazel studied him for a moment longer, then she nodded. She followed Sonia to the SUV. At the door, she stopped and turned back.
Mr. Ashford?
Yes, thank you for not walking toward me. She got into the car. The door closed. The SUV pulled away. Malcolm watched it turn onto Danforth and disappear into the long river of taillights heading east. Jocelyn stood beside him. Go home, Malcolm. Eat something. I'll call you by 10. He went home. He did not eat. He sat in the chair by the window of his house in Riverdale, the house he had lived in, alone for 11 years since his wife, Colleen, had died of pancreatic cancer in the bedroom upstairs. And he listened to the sounds of the street through his failing ears and thought about a girl holding a plastic bag in a parking lot and a mother who squeezed hands in a code that meant love. Jocelyn called at 9:47. Hazel is at Faye's. She's had dinner. She's in bed. Faye says she asked to keep the light on. She says the girl is polite and quiet and asked if she could take a bath and use the word please 3 times in one sentence. And Solane? Solane Duval is at a long-term psychiatric care facility in Cobourg. She has been there for 19 months. The diagnosis is severe major depressive disorder with catatonic features, complicated by grief. The facility is. Jocelyn paused. It's adequate. It's publicly funded. It's not what I would want for someone I cared about. What would you want? There's a facility in Kingston, the Belhaven Center. It's private. It's expensive. It has a program specifically for trauma-related catatonia. Their outcomes are significantly better. How expensive? $14,000 a month. Move her, Malcolm. Jocelyn, I have spent 40 years billing at $1,100 an hour. I have more money than I have ears that work. Move her. She did not argue. She rarely did when he mentioned the ears. It was the one thing he had told her that he had not told anyone else, and she understood that the telling of it had cost him something, and that he had paid the cost specifically so that she would know the stakes of the days he had left in which he could hear. The next morning, Malcolm drove to the beaches. Faye Drummond answered the door in jeans and a flannel shirt. She was in her 50s, small, with the kind of face that had decided a long time ago to prioritize warmth over beauty and had been right to do so. Mr. Ashford, Jocelyn said you'd come. How is she? She slept. Not well, but she slept. She woke twice. The second time she came out to the hallway and sat on the floor outside my bedroom door. I found her there at 6. She'd brought her blanket. Malcolm felt the stone in his chest turn again. May I see her? She's in the kitchen. She's having toast. She puts an extraordinary amount of peanut butter on toast. I've never seen anything like it. He followed Faye down the hall. The kitchen was small, warm, full of morning light. Hazel was sitting at the table with a piece of toast that was, as Faye had described, buried under a layer of peanut butter so thick it had structural integrity. She was eating it with intense concentration. She looked up when Malcolm entered. Mr. Ashford, good morning, Hazel. That's a lot of peanut butter. I like peanut butter. At the group home, we got one knife spread. Here, Faye said I could have as much as I want. And you're testing that. Yes, sir. He sat across from her. He did not ask permission. He sat the way he sat in boardrooms, deliberately, with his weight committed, in a way that said he was not leaving soon. Hazel, I'd like to ask you about your mother. I'd like to help if you'll let me. The girl set down the toast. She wiped her hands on a paper towel carefully, one finger at a time. It was the gesture of a child who had been taught manners by someone who cared, and who had carried those manners through every place that didn't. Help how? There is a place in Kingston that might be better for her. Better doctors. A program that's designed for what she's going through. I'd like to move her there. Can I visit her? Every week, if you'd like. I'll arrange the drive. Kingston is far, it is. But the car has seats, and the seats are comfortable, and the drive goes through some of the nicest country in Ontario. You can see the lake for most of it. Hazel looked at him. She had, he noticed, her father's eyes, or what he imagined her father's eyes had been. Dark, direct, the kind that did not flinch. Why are you doing this? It was not a grateful question, it was a suspicious one. Malcolm understood this. He understood that a child who had been moved from home to aunt to group home to foster care had earned the right to be suspicious of generosity, because in her experience, generosity was usually the prologue to another kind of leaving. Because I heard you, he said, in the parking lot. I heard you say you'd be good, and it occurred to me that no child should have to promise to be good in order to be kept. Hazel was quiet for a long time. Then she picked up her toast and took another bite and chewed it slowly and said, with her mouth still slightly full, "Okay." They drove to Cobourg the following Saturday. Jocelyn had arranged the transfer to the Belhaven Center in Kingston, but it would take another week for the paperwork. In the meantime, Malcolm wanted Hazel to see her mother. The facility was a long, low building on a road that ran between two soybean fields. The paint on the trim was peeling. The parking lot had 3 cars in it. Inside, the hallway smelled of floor cleaner and something else, something institutional and faintly sweet, the smell of places where time moves differently than it does outside. A nurse named Bonnie met them at the reception desk. She was young, overworked, kind. Soline is in the common room. She's been having a better week. She ate lunch by herself yesterday, which is new. She won't speak, but she tracks movement. She watches the birds outside the window. Does she know we're coming? We told her this morning. We showed her Hazel's name on a piece of paper. She touched the paper. Hazel walked ahead. Malcolm followed. His cane tapped softly on the linoleum. He had started using the cane 2 months ago, not because he needed it for balance, but because the hearing loss had begun to affect his spatial awareness and he had stumbled twice in public, and the cane gave him an anchor in the world's geography that his ears no longer reliably provided. The common room was large, bright, largely empty. 3 residents sat in chairs arranged near the windows. One was knitting something that had no apparent shape. One was asleep. The third was a woman in her mid-30s, thin, with dark hair that had been cut short, sitting very straight in a chair that faced the glass. Hazel stopped in the doorway. Mama. The word was barely above a whisper. It carried the weight of 19 months of not saying it. The woman in the chair did not turn. But something changed. Malcolm saw it. A shift in the angle of her shoulders, a barely perceptible tilt of the head, the way a body recognizes a sound it has been waiting for even when the mind cannot process what the sound means. Hazel crossed the room. She pulled a chair close to her mother and sat. She did not touch her immediately. She sat and looked at her mother's face with the careful, desperate attention of someone trying to memorize something she was afraid of forgetting. Then she reached out and took her mother's hand. 1 squeeze. I'm here. 2 squeezes back. I love you. Malcolm stood at the window. He pressed the heel of his hand against his sternum. He had, in his career, seen a great many people cry in courtrooms. He had seen defendants cry, and plaintiffs cry, and once, memorably, a judge. He had never cried himself. He did not cry now. But the effort of not crying was, he understood, becoming a kind of tax he was paying on the privilege of being present for this moment, and the tax was high. They stayed for an hour. Hazel talked to her mother, a soft, steady monologue about Faye's house and the peanut butter and the cat next door, who came to the window every morning, and how she was reading a book about a girl who sailed a boat across the Pacific, and how school was going to start soon, and how she hoped she would be at a school close enough to Faye's that she could walk, because she liked walking in the mornings when everything was still cold and quiet. Soline did not speak, but twice more she squeezed Hazel's hand. And once, very briefly, her fingers moved to the girl's wrist and rested there, on the pulse, the way a person rests their hand on something alive to confirm that it is. In the car driving back, Hazel fell asleep. Her head rested against the window. The plastic bag was on her lap. Malcolm, sitting beside her, looked at the bag and asked quietly, Hazel, what's in the bag that's small and hard? I've been trying to work it out. She opened one eye. A compass. My dad gave it to me. He said if I ever got lost, I should find north and walk toward it. He said nothing bad ever happens if you're walking north. That's not geographically accurate. I know, but it's my dad. She closed her eye and slept the rest of the way. The transfer to Belhaven took place the following Thursday. Malcolm did not go. He sent Jocelyn, who reported that the facility was clean, well-staffed, and had a garden with raised beds where residents could grow herbs. Soline had been placed in a private room with a view of a stand of sugar maples. The attending psychiatrist, Dr. Rami Manskour, had reviewed her file and believed there was, with the right combination of treatment and time, a possibility of improvement. He had used the word possibility carefully in the way that good doctors use words, leaving room for both hope and its absence. 3 weeks later, Malcolm received a phone call that rearranged the architecture of his week. It came from a number he did not recognize. The voice on the other end was young, male, precise. Mr. Ashford, my name is Declan Morrow. I'm an associate at your firm. We haven't met. I work in the estates division under Mr. Crew. What can I do for you, Mr. Morrow? This isn't an easy call to make, sir. I've been asked by someone at the firm to reach out to you privately. I'm going to tell you something that I believe you need to hear, and I'm going to ask you to hear it completely before you respond. Malcolm sat down. He had heard this cadence before, the cadence of a person who had rehearsed a difficult sentence and was now delivering it from memory with the careful precision of a man diffusing a device. Go ahead. 3 weeks ago, the firm's managing committee held a meeting. You were not invited. The subject of the meeting was your fitness to continue as senior partner. Specifically, Your hearing. Someone on the committee obtained a copy of your audiological report. I don't know how. The report was circulated. The committee voted to initiate a review under the partnership agreement's incapacity clause. The review is being led by Mr. Crew, Edmund Crew, Malcolm's partner for 26 years, the man who had stood as witness at Malcolm's wedding. The man who had delivered the eulogy at Colleen's funeral, a eulogy Malcolm had listened to through tears and had later told Edmund was the most generous thing anyone had ever said about the woman he loved. Edmund. Malcolm said, "Yes, sir. Who obtained the report?" "I don't know for certain, but the meeting was convened by Mr. Crew, and the report was included in the materials he distributed." Malcolm was quiet. The room was quiet. The clock on the wall, an old marine chronometer Colleen had found at an estate sale in Elora 30 years ago, ticked in its steady, unhurried way. "Mr. Morrow, why are you telling me this?" "Because I read the Coldwater River case file when I was in law school, sir. The one with the First Nations community and the mining company. It's the reason I became a lawyer. And I believe what is being done to you is wrong. You understand that telling me this puts your position at risk?" "Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Morrow." He hung up. He sat for a long time. He thought about Edmund. He thought about the partnership agreement, which he had helped draft in 1998, and the incapacity clause, which he had included as a safeguard for situations involving cognitive decline, not hearing loss. And he understood with the same clear, cold clarity with which he had always understood legal arguments that the clause was being used in a way he had never intended, and that the man using it was the man he had trusted most. He called Jocelyn. "I know," she said before he spoke. "How long have you known? Since yesterday. Declan Morrow came to see me first. I told him to call you directly. You needed to hear it from someone whose loyalty hadn't been tested yet. And yours has?" "Edmund called me into his office last Tuesday. He asked me for your medical files. I told him I didn't have access to your medical files. He asked me if I was aware of any health concerns. I told him that even if I were, disclosing them without your consent would be a violation of my professional obligations and, frankly, of decency. He thanked me and asked me to close the door on my way out. What did you do?" "I closed the door. Then I went to my desk and began making copies of every document I could find related to the managing committee's recent activities, including 3 emails that Mr. Crew sent from his firm account to a disability insurance specialist, inquiring about the process for involuntary retirement of a partner on medical grounds. He's been planning this for at least 2 months, based on the email timestamps." Malcolm leaned back in his chair. He looked at the ceiling. There was a crack in the plaster that had been there since Colleen's time, and that he had never fixed because she had once said it looked like a river if you squinted at it. And he had never been able to unsee the river after that. "Jocelyn, what do you think I should do?" In 22 years, he had never asked her that question. She was quiet for a moment. "I think you should fight. But I think you should fight on your own terms, not his. And I think the first thing you should do is schedule the surgery." He scheduled the surgery. Dr. Ewan performed the stapdectomy on his right ear on a Tuesday morning in November. The procedure took 2 hours. When Malcolm woke in the recovery room, the world was wrapped in cotton. He could hear his own breathing, thickened and unfamiliar. A nurse was saying something. He watched her lips move and felt the words arrive a fraction late, like a dubbed film. By Thursday, the cotton began to lift. Sounds returned in layers. First, the low ones, the rumble of the hospital's ventilation, the bass note of traffic on University Avenue. Then the middle register, voices in the hallway, the click of a keyboard at the nurse's station. And finally, on Friday morning, the high, thin song of a bird outside the window. Hazel visited on Saturday. Faye drove her. The girl walked into the hospital room carrying a paper bag that contained 2 peanut butter sandwiches, one for Malcolm and one for herself, and a thermos of hot chocolate that she had made, she said, by herself, although Faye had helped with the stove part. "How are your ears?" she asked. "Improving. I can hear you quite well today." "Good. Because I have something to tell you and its importance." "I'm listening." My mom spoke. Malcolm set down the sandwich. "When?" "Yesterday I went to see her at Belhaven. Dr. Mansour was there. He said she'd been making sounds for a few days. Little sounds, not words. But yesterday when I came in, she looked at me and she said my name. She said Hazel. Just once. Then she closed her eyes and she was quiet again. But she said it. Dr. Mansour said it's a very good sign. He said the brain is finding pathways. He used the word pathways. I like that word. Malcolm did not speak for a moment. He could not. "That is a very good sign, Hazel. Mr. Ashford?" "Yes." "Are your eyes wet?" "They are." "Is that because you're happy?" "It is because I am happy." She handed him a napkin from the paper bag. "Here. I brought extra because the sandwiches are messy." He took the napkin. He wiped his eyes. He ate the sandwich, which was, as promised, extremely messy and very good. In December, Malcolm returned to the firm. He walked into the boardroom on a Monday morning, his hearing restored to 70% in the right ear, his cane left at home, his suit pressed, his posture, the posture of a man who had spent 40 years entering rooms and making them pay attention. Edmund Crewe was at the far end of the table. He was 61, trim, silver at the temples, the kind of man whose confidence lived in his jawline. He looked up when Malcolm entered. Something moved across his face. Not guilt, not surprise, but the faint recalculation of a man who had built a plan on the assumption that its subject would not show up. Malcolm, Edmund. The room held 8 other partners. Jocelyn had briefed each of them individually over the preceding 2 weeks. She had shown them the emails. She had shown them the audiological report that had been obtained. She had confirmed through Dr. Ewan's office by contacting the clinic directly and requesting it under a false pretense. She had laid out the timeline, the meetings, the insurance inquiries, the incapacity clause. Malcolm did not raise his voice. He had spent 40 years training his voice not to rise, and on this morning the training was not difficult because the anger had passed through him weeks ago, and what remained was something quieter. And in some ways worse, a grief that wore the shape of a man he had once loved as a brother. He laid out the case. He did it the way he had always done it. Methodically, precisely, without editorializing, letting the facts build their own architecture. He did not call Edmund a traitor. He did not use the word betrayal. He used the words breach of fiduciary duty and unauthorized access to confidential medical records and conduct unbecoming a partner of this firm, and each phrase landed on the table like a stone dropped into still water. Edmund did not deny it. He sat very still and said nothing, and his silence was not the silence of a man who had nothing to say, but the silence of a man who understood, as all good lawyers eventually do, that there are moments when any word you speak will become evidence. The vote was 7-1. Edmund's partnership was dissolved. He left the building at noon with a banker's box and a severance agreement, and the particular walk of a man who had lost not a job but a version of himself. Malcolm watched him go from the window of his office on the 14th floor. He watched until Edmund's figure disappeared around the corner of Bay Street, and then he stood at the window for a while longer, looking at the city, the cranes, the lake in the distance, the long gray expanse of November sky, and he let himself feel the loss. Because the loss was real even though the justice was correct. Jocelyn appeared in the doorway. Ruth Okafor is on the phone. She says she has news about Hazel's placement. What news? She says the permanent guardianship application you filed has been approved. The hearing is scheduled for January 14th. Malcolm sat down at his desk. He opened the top drawer. Inside, beside a fountain pen Colleen had given him on their 20th anniversary, was a compass. It was small, brass, slightly dented. Hazel had given it to him the previous week. I don't need it anymore, she had said. I found north. He closed the drawer. He picked up the phone. Ruth, thank you. Tell me what I need to do next. On a Saturday in March, Malcolm drove Hazel to Kingston. The sugar maples along the highway were still bare, but the light was different, longer, the kind of light that arrives in Ontario in early spring and says, without saying it, that the worst is behind you. Hazel sat in the back seat with her backpack, the same backpack Faye had bought her in October to replace the plastic bag. Inside it were a notebook, 2 peanut butter sandwiches, the thermos, and a small framed photograph of her father that Jocelyn had tracked down through the warehouse's HR department. A copy of his employee ID photo, grainy, unsmiling, but his. They arrived at Belhaven at noon. Dr. Mansaucer met them at the entrance. He was smiling, which Malcolm had learned over 4 months of visits was not a thing Dr. Mansour did casually. She's been asking for you, he said to Hazel. She uses your name now. She used it 3 times this morning. Hazel walked down the hallway. Malcolm followed. The hallway smelled of lemon cleaner, and underneath, something green. Someone had opened a window somewhere, and the early spring air was coming in, carrying with it the smell of wet earth and the faintest suggestion of the wild garlic that grew along the limestone ridge behind the building. Soline was sitting in her room, not in the common room. She was sitting at a small table by the window. On the table was a piece of paper and a pencil. She had been drawing something, a shape, a circle with lines coming out of it. It could have been a sun. It could have been a flower. It could have been anything. It was the act of drawing that mattered, not the result. She looked up when Hazel entered the room. She looked at her daughter. Her eyes were clear. "Hazel," she said. Her voice was thin, unused, like a door that had not been opened in a long time and whose hinges were still remembering how to move. "Mama." Hazel crossed the room. She knelt beside her mother's chair. She took her mother's hand. 1 squeeze, 2 squeezes back. And then, for the first time in almost 2 years, Solange lifted her other hand and placed it on her daughter's head, on the dark hair that someone had finally cut properly, and held it there. "You grew," she said. "I did, Mama. You look like your father." "I know." Solange looked past Hazel to the doorway. where Malcolm stood with his cane resting against the frame. She looked at him for a long time. She did not know who he was. She had been told by Dr. Mansour, by the nurses, by Hazel herself, but the knowing was still coming back in pieces, the way a radio finds a station in a car moving through hills. "Thank you," she said. Malcolm nodded once. He did not enter the room. Some rooms belong to other people. Hazel visits her mother every Saturday. The drive takes 2 hours each way. Malcolm goes with her most weeks. They eat peanut butter sandwiches in the car and listen to the radio. And sometimes they talk, and sometimes they don't, and both kinds of drive are good. Celine is not cured, Dr. Mansour has stopped using the word cured and started using the word returning, which is, Malcolm thinks, more honest and more beautiful. She speaks now in short sentences. She has begun walking in the garden. She drew a picture of a sparrow last Tuesday and gave it to Hazel, who keeps it in the frame next to her father's photograph. Malcolm's hearing in his right ear is steady at 72%. His left ear is scheduled for surgery in the fall. He has reduced his hours at the firm. He has not retired. He has told the partners he will retire when he is ready, and not before, and none of them have argued, because the last person who argued with Malcolm Ashford about what he was ready for is currently practicing law in a much smaller office on a much quieter street. The compass sits on Malcolm's desk, next to Colleen's fountain pen. He has never used it to find North. He does not need to. North, as it turns out, found him, barefoot and holding a plastic bag, in a parking lot behind a Loblaws on Danforth Avenue on a Monday evening in October, and asked him, without knowing she was asking, to be careful. If this story moved you, please like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it today, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Subscribe to Honest Silent Stories for more stories about the small acts of attention that change everything and the unlikely people who hear what the rest of the world walks past.